All right, it is 12:50. Hello and welcome to FormFest 2024. My name is Ariel Kennan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a senior director for the Digital Benefits Network here at the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation, which is part of Georgetown University. You can learn more about our work at the link that you'll see in the chat. Please feel free to use the chat to say hello with your name and where you're joining us from. You will see our chat manager, Isaac, in there as well. For any questions, we'll be using the Q&A function, which you can find on the right side of your screen. Please add questions as you think of them, and I will ask them aloud for our speakers and the recording during our Q&A portion at the very end of the session. We are going to dive right into our sessions. Our speakers will introduce themselves briefly, and you can also check out their full bios by clicking on their speaker profiles. We encourage you to connect with them on LinkedIn as well. So each presenter group will have about 25 minutes to present, leaving us with about 10 minutes at the very end for questions. So again, welcome to FormFest, and I'll turn it over to you, Rachel, Alissa, and Tom.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be here. And our team at First Five South Carolina is going to just show you what we do and tell you about our background in developing great forms. So we are really big fans of keeping it simple, and we really want families to be able to have what they need, want, and deserve when it comes to finding forms and finding information and having choices about what public benefits to participate in. And so this is a really ugly flowchart that shows the state and federal funds that come into the South Carolina early childhood system. And these teal circles and icons in the center, you'll see these are the members of the Early Childhood Advisory Council. And so we were really fortunate to receive preschool development grant funding from the Administration for Children and Families to build our early childhood system. And so we started in 2019 by developing a product called Palmetto Pre-K, which brought together our early care and education partners to help families find out if they were eligible for publicly funded preschool. And from that, we found that families wanted to know more. They wanted to know about the whole array of programs and services. And so the Early Childhood Advisory Council voted to adopt First Five South Carolina as a project. And we completed a one-year study that looked at what it might look like, who our partners should be. And from that, we determined that our governance structure as a state agency could be looking at what was a publicly funded program and service. And so we used this flow of funds to identify over 60 programs that appear on First Five South Carolina. And we broke them into 5 simple categories for families. So First Five is the first 5 years of life, and it's also the first, the 5 categories that really represent a whole family's needs to make sure their child has everything that they need to flourish. And one of the things that's been essential to us throughout our development is to center family voice. So we know that parents are the primary audience for First Five, and we want to make sure that they're always able to find what they're looking for. And in our history, many programs have found that they have under enrollment, or it's a challenge for families to find out about them. And so one of the things that we have heard from one of our Family Voice Council members is that the paperwork is always daunting. Knowing the eligibility criteria is always nearly impossible. Navigating government websites is really challenging. And so First Five brings all of these together in one simple place for families. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alissa to walk you through a demo.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much again. So here at First Five South Carolina, we are so passionate about empowering our families and motivating them, ensuring that they know a way and make sure that they use First Five as their public services, their main resource for public services for their young children. As you can see, this is our main page. We thrive on being simple, using simple language, ensuring that our design is very uplifting and motivating to use. As you can see, we have services where if you do that drop down, you have the 5 categories. They can do their research there and see what programs we currently offer, who we are, what First Five is about, how we got started. We have learning materials, including articles and additional resources so they can help within their families at home. Stories from our past families there that have used First Five. And if they need more guidance after looking over our entire website, we give them guidance for that as well. Another thing I would love to point out is right there at the top there, if we do have a Spanish speaking family, they're easily able to hit that button there and our website will be in Spanish for them. They can also go ahead and hit the login button and complete an application, which I will talk about further. Most importantly, if they don't want to do any of that work, they can hit the blue banner and start their eligibility criteria, the eligibility screener. So today we're working with Pamela Cooper. Pamela Cooper, as you can see, she put in her first, last name, her email address, her phone number, how she heard about First Five. The most important part of this screen here, I want to say, is our consent. So before she can go further, she has to consent to knowing that we will not sell her information. Any information that she puts into this eligibility screener, we will use to reach back out to her to provide her with programs and services. So the second part of our screener is going to be the child's birthday. As we said, we want to keep it nice and easy. Make sure that Pamela doesn't have to do any further research herself and see what her child is eligible for based off age. So we ask for the date of birth to make sure we don't recommend anything that her child won't be qualified for. Same thing with address. We make sure all the way down to zip codes that we are very accurate in providing our parents and our families with programs and resources that's applicable to their actual location there. This is my favorite screen. This is our additional criteria screen. The beautiful thing about this is that initially building First Five, we heard and we listened, collaborated with families and our initial agencies to build this criteria screen. Here at First Five, as I said, we want to make sure that we encourage, we want to make sure that we use simple and uplifting language. And most importantly, that once we ask you one question on the eligibility screener, that one question will either make you eligible for an abundance of programs or just make sure that we narrow them down for you. For instance, instead of saying my child, I am homeless, we say my child family is experiencing homelessness to maintain morale and excitement for completing the screener. The last part of our eligibility screener is going to be the income. It's very important. Of course, we all know that most programs and resources out there have some type of income eligibility criteria or guidelines, anywhere from 150% to 200 sometimes. And we want to make sure we don't waste Pamela's time. So we go ahead and gather that information before we recommend any type of programs or resources. This is what we call our prize screen. So after Pamela finished that beautiful, nice and quick and simple eligibility screener, these are the programs that she can apply for here above the blue banner directly on First Five. By hitting that blue banner that says apply now on First Five, as you can see, still very nice and simplified language there with the understanding that she is about to go and apply for these programs. This is the bottom half of that same web page there. These programs she may also be eligible for as well. However, she will not be able to apply directly on First Five, meaning that she will have to hit learn more, but we will make sure that she has direct guidance and expectations as to how to apply or learn more about those programs. So if Pamela did not want to do any type of eligibility screening, she just wants to see what's near her. As you can see, her same Allendale, South Carolina address is there at the top left-hand corner. She's interested in 4K programs. And so what we do here at First Five, we will give her a list. It will have the name of the agency, the program that they offer, their address, their phone number, and most importantly, distance, so that Pamela knows exactly where they're located and how far she is from them to get assistance. So after Pamela would have hit the apply now, that blue banner, she would come here to this screen. As I said previously, we do make sure that you can log in and out if you do need to finish or complete applications in more than one sitting. So you can create a First Five account where we securely have your information there so you can pick up where you left off, or you can apply as a guest. To the right of that, as you can see, that simple sign in button. So Pamela could just sign back in if she's already a member. This is our basic information page on our common application. As you can see, Pamela Cooper's information was auto-filled from the eligibility screener that she first did right there. So we still have all of her information, her address, her number, her name. However, she will have to put in her child's information. And the great thing about this page, she can add more than one child. And that is also within the terms and conditions that we provided to her and she consent to at the beginning of the eligibility screener. This is what Pamela would see once she finished that previous screen. So this is going to be all of the programs that we told her that she may be eligible for on that prior screen. The beautiful thing about this screen, once she completes the Allendale Fairfax Elementary pre-K application, for instance, she will receive a green check mark. Not only that, we have submission language, which with every application she does and she completes, she'll have submission language with expectations, contact information if she doesn't hear back. So that way she knows, okay, I've done this, I've done that, and she knows and can confirm every application that she's taken care of. I'm going to pass it to Tom.
Yeah, so we showed you how it kind of works from a parent's perspective, but just to kind of show how the data flows. So first, the parent and guardian would complete the eligibility screener and then go to the common application and complete the basic family information form. And then that'll automatically pre-fill the individual program applications. And we did it that way because having one application would require all the programs to agree on language and things like that, which was not really easy to do. So as you fill out each application, it'll store completed information and pre-fill the other applications. Then as a parent submits each application, we have multiple ways for the government agencies to receive the information. We have API connections directly into the agency data systems. We have we have an email notification where they can do a secure HIPAA compliant login to view the information. And we've basically worked with the agencies to use whatever methods they need. And then the agencies reach out to the parents for the next steps. Rachel, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to come off mute. So we really wanted this to be more efficient for families because one of the things that they told us in the 2019 parent needs assessment was that they wanted more time with their families and they wanted to be able to find out about early care and early education opportunities for their families that were high quality. And so one of the things that we have found, however, through looking at all of our site metrics is that families, 62% of them are coming outside of normal government business office hours. And so this means that they are able to find out information at times that work for them. So whether they're getting off of their second shift or if they are, waking up with the baby at 3 a.m., they're really able to navigate here and do an application at a time they otherwise wouldn't. I also want to point out that many of the programs that are on our common application used to only have paper applications. So families would have to come to elementary schools. They would have to get a packet, go home, complete the packet, come back. And then if they had forgotten any of their important documents, it took even longer for them to complete the application process. And so in this way, they're able to upload documents into a secure document vault and make sure that they are able to include it on a variety of applications and then reference it again in the future. And at every step of our development, we have made sure that we listen to families. So we had parent listening sessions, we had community stakeholder meetings while we were building First Five, and then also as part of our product development process in 2024. And that is what we're using to develop our roadmap for 2025. And I just want to point out that we know it's working for families because we listen. And so I'm going to read this to you in case anyone is having difficulty seeing the screen. So when our 2-year-old daughter was diagnosed with an extremely rare syndrome that impacted her hearing, we didn't know where to start. First Five South Carolina connected us to the resources we needed and coached us through the application process. Having all of that information in one centralized place was key to getting the right kind of help and fast. And that's from Katie and her daughter, who you can see on our screen. I also wanted to point out that we began a project through the financial support of the Pritzker Children's Initiative and the David and Lucille Packard Foundation to help other states learn about early childhood integrated portals for information and choice for families. And so we have the ability to meet with other states and provide technical assistance on any questions they have, especially about building buy-in and what is our development process like. And I also am really proud of our reach for First Five. We have 212,000 households with children ages birth through 5 in South Carolina. And just in the last fiscal year, we've had over 155,000 visitors. And we have actually been a website since 2022. So we've had a large reach, and we know that children are being born every day in South Carolina. And so we've done a lot of outreach with, newborn supply kits to community health partners, working with direct service providers, and providing training to direct service providers so that they can also assist families in navigating. So we've taken a really local approach to training and outreach, as well as a more broadcast approach. Thank you. And we look forward to any questions you might have at the end. And I'm going to turn it back to Ariel now.
Thank you all so much. Really cool to see that amazing work helping out families get the benefits they're eligible for. And you're also ahead of time. So hopefully we'll have more time for questions at the end. So a reminder to everyone watching, please use the Q&A function and add your questions there. And we will answer all the questions at the end. And now it's time to turn over to Tate and Sean. Please take it away.
Sorry. Hey, all. Hello, FormFest. Thanks for having us to come talk to you all about the federal government's, one of the federal government's largest and most complex forms. I'm Sean Cassidy, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a lead UX designer for the Office of Federal Student Aid.
And I'm Tate Chamberlain, 42-year-old who uses he, him, and the lead user experience designer for the Office of Federal Student Aid.
And we're here to talk to you all about some of the most ambitious redesign of the FAFSA form in decades, and how we continue to refine the user experience, even faced with several obstacles. But first, let's just remind ourselves why getting forms like the FAFSA form right matter. We were on a usability testing call with a student back in April, and this is sometimes the pain that we hear directly from students. The government's failed me, but I'm not trying to be an ass because I just don't understand. I did the form, I did everything I was supposed to do. You don't lie on forms, you just put the tax information in and it's out of your hands. That's not enough to pay for a semester. I'm trying not to cry. I don't know what to say. You should be glad to hear that this is actually a frustration coming from a misunderstanding of what is known as the Student Aid Index, or SAI, and it does not actually indicate how much aid this particular student was going to get. But a misunderstanding like this is something very real, experienced by many, many others that really don't have UX researchers like ourselves sharing their screen who actually can explain it to them after the session. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of the reinvention that we had last year that was instrumental in informing how we approach the redesign this year. why we need to change the playbook from last year's cycle and how we did it, a little bit about the research process and the way that we connected with users in very different ways this year. And then finally, how we made improvements in the midst of a crisis of execution. And then also, where does that leave us in 2024? Now I'm going to pass it off to Tate to talk about the rocky start.
Thanks, Sean. And before we get going here, I just want to emphasize two quick things. One, we're going to be focusing on the user experience of the form in this talk, as that's where Sean and my experience is. So we're not going to get too much into the back end or other issues. And two, we're just two parts of this story. I cannot emphasize it enough, the literally hundreds of dedicated folks that worked extremely hard to make a successful 2024 launch of the FAFSA form possible. This is not just Sean and my hard work. We're merely representatives for the next 20 minutes or so. So the FAFSA form itself has been a primarily online experience since the early 1990s. It's gone through a number of updates and visual refreshes since then, but nothing fundamental has really changed with it, from the back-end processing system to the questions asked and the aid calculations made for nearly 40 years. But first, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the front page of CNN and other news sources, what even is the FAFSA form, or the free application for federal student aid? Well, the FAFSA form is how you apply for federal grants and loans for college, career trade school, or graduate school. It's completed by more than 15 million students annually. And though the form we provide, through that form, we provide more than $114 billion annually in loans and grants to help folks take advantage of higher education. So it has a big reach. And it remained basically that until 2019, when two bills were passed, the Future Act and the FAFSA Simplification Act. At a high level, parts of these acts were intended to work together to simplify the FAFSA, as the name states. They did this in a couple of key ways. First, the Future Act allows for direct import of IRS financial information into the student's form. And the FAFSA Simplification Act creates a new aid eligibility calculation. It creates new family definitions for the student and different questions required to either be added or removed. And all of this needed to go live by the 2023 award year cycle. Well, in brief, there was a push for the FAFSA form to be easier and shorter. And that's important because the FAFSA form is not either of those things in many ways. It's over 100 questions. It can take up to an hour to fill out. And for dependent students, right, and folks with certain tax filing statuses, there are other people who have to contribute to the form, consent, and sign it for it to be properly processed. And then the real results of the form, what folks actually want out of the FAFSA, which are those loans and grants, that's not even the output that they get from us. Instead, they get a submission summary, that estimated SAI, which is easy to misinterpret, as you heard earlier. And that info then goes to the schools. And those schools provide students with aid letters that they need to compare, which they then finally turn into disbursements. So when we wanted to not just respond to those mandated changes, but also overhaul the processing and partner backends at the same time and make additional improvements to the experience, it was a big undertaking to hide all this. And that big undertaking, as many people know, resulted in some very well-publicized delays. The front-end form was initially delayed from October 1st. Then processing of the form was delayed. And then the ability to make corrections was also delayed beyond that. And there were technical bugs at each release of functionality as well. So how did it go? Well, we went from a sleeper department that is never in the news to a department that is on the front page of CNN and other news outlets. We received a lot of criticism that you can see here. Some examples of it, some of it very fair, some of it perhaps not quite as balanced as we would have liked to see. But I think this quote from a usability tester sums up how a lot of people felt about that launch, that 2023 launch, from an external perspective. If you weren't ready to launch, you should have used the old form and let people do this in the fall. Your delay and soft launch and funky website issues were a nightmare and caused a lot of added stress in what is already a stressful process. Absolutely. Now, I do want to just note a few silver linings, even around last year's launch. We did a product design refresh that went, overall very well. We increased transparency through my activity integration. We implemented beyond the required scope for things like parents owning their section of the form, which wasn't the case before. We had very effective messaging for new sections, such as the race ethnicity questions. So people weren't worried about potentially invasive questions. And we did a lot of harm mitigation in the midst of major development efforts and correction, which we'll talk about in a subsequent section. But rather than defending or placing blame for the botched launch, we really want to take the next few minutes to talk to you about what came after that, how we learned from it, and what just happened with this year's form, all from a user perspective. And we learned a lot. We had a number of very clear takeaways. First, that it wasn't just the raw time delay that was painful to users, but that the staggered nature of the delays. Users submitted the form, but then they didn't hear back from us. Then when they did hear back from us about a required correction, they couldn't make that correction. It was incredibly frustrating. Second, users just wanted us to communicate more. It can be so tempting to dig in during a crisis and communicate less, to be so fearful of having to change the timeline of a patch or update that you don't give an update about it until you're about to ship. But that lack of communication just really, from the user's perspective, makes things worse. And the resulting soft launches that we had to resort to, where we made the form available for a limited period of time, sometimes as short as an hour before taking it down again, all without announcements before and after these periods, it all caused more frustration. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Sean to talk about how we changed that playbook and the results of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tate. So we really knew that we needed to change the playbook for this year, which is the 2025-26 school year form, and make changes fast. The issue with the FAFSA form, obviously, is that it's an annual form, and we must get it out. So there's not much time to really pause the work. This year, Federal Student Aid invested in bringing in a number of people from the U.S. Digital Service and several new experts to help with the entire FAFSA launch. So while I'll talk about this work, again, as the work that we touched, Tate and I do want to recognize that there is a massive team effort behind, and some of the best folks that I've had the privilege to work with to make all this happen. So the mandate was simple. 1, improve user experience by delivering a form that works. We want to 2, reinvent the ways of working. And 3, regain public trust and expand research opportunities where possible. Improve user experience by delivering a form that works. Well, you can't really have a great user experience if the form is glitchy, slow, and unresponsive. So while all new software encounters technical bugs, there were several technical issues last year that were basically showstoppers for many. The mandate this year was to fix the form. You can't sweat the smaller details like question comprehension, form aesthetics, and usability if the form has bugs that are showstoppers. So the first thing that we focused on this year was basically to stabilize the form and reduce risk where possible by limiting how many changes we actually were making to this year's form from last year. As you can tell, maybe or not, by the 2 images on the screen, the new form on the right looks basically identical to the previous form. This was on purpose. But being the inventive, creative, and often asking for a forgiveness type, Tate and I also did work to advocate for smaller changes that we knew would improve user experience, like making the form clearer when students and parents successfully transfer their IRS tax information. 2, reinvent the ways of working. The second tenet of this playbook was changing the way we worked with multiple teams. Federal Student Aid has a lot of different contractors and vendor teams, including several in-house experts dispatched from the U.S. Digital Service and UX contractors and our own internal design team. In past, we had different teams working on different problems, but our information sharing was really quite poor. So with UX work, we deliberately worked to create a unified team and centralize our UX efforts, ensuring direct coordination among folks. If you basically shift from what team or what organization do you work for to a what problem are you trying to solve for mindset, the broader FAFSA team, the Federal Student Aid, also hosted in-person FAFSA summits. Many of the Federal Student Aid staff are remote and dispersed across the country. So having these in-person intensive 1 or 2 day workshops, basically with federal government and contractor staffs, made the problem solving real and forced collaboration that was unseen in years past. And then the last tenet of how we shifted basically was to remove the risk where possible. So moving to a less risky model of launching the form. In years past, basically on the image on the left here, it was basically everyone all at once. So cross your fingers and good luck model, basically, to a small scale on the right this year, which is a less risky model, where we open the form to several hundreds or thousands of people, students and parents, and we monitor early submissions. Then we slowly scale and we invite more students to participate. This was basically our beta strategy. So while beta testing is not a new concept in software development, it can be new to many government programs. While maybe pilots tend to be somewhat more acceptable, the beta test is not. Federal student aid did betas in the past, most notably maybe for the student loan debt relief application, but nowhere to the scale that we did for this year. Betas allow us basically to scale the system at our own pace. It can also reduce user confusion because it's not a soft launch where potentially the form might go offline while you're in the middle of finishing a draft. Instead, it basically limits early access to the system to a select group of folks. And lastly, it gives us on the UX team real data, and it also offers us unprecedented access to students to test with. So researching the user experience. Federal student aid has had a long and robust UX research process with known methods like usability testing, but it was, again, quite different this time around. Our research efforts focused on basically two areas. We did in-person beta testing at FAFSA nights. These were actually across the US in these different locations on this map. And these were hosted by nonprofits and schools. And then we also did virtual usability testing that our team conducted with over 30 participants. So from October 1st of this year to November 21st, we put out the call to college access nonprofits, colleges, schools to participate in these beta periods. These organizations help recruit folks on our behalf to participate in the beta. Many of these organizations hosted what are known as FAFSA nights, basically where students and parents are given early access to the form and they come and fill out the form at the event. We showed up from our team and several other teams to support these groups, but also to observe, ask questions directly to students, parents, and counselors, and gather as much feedback as we could that we could directly put back into the form design. So for example, in California, we observed how painful it was for students without social security numbers to have to manually enter their tax information, despite having a taxpayer identification or ITIN number. We observed students helping parents translate an English tax return to the FAFSA, which the parent was filling out in Spanish. You can't learn how painful that is from an open comment field on a survey. You have to go out and experience it and observe it. So what did we learn? At beta nights, we observed students struggling with a number of questions that we had never seen before. It's much different to actually be asked the question on a form for real and observe that versus just reacting to a question on a clickable prototype. We also found that students and parents struggle to invite the parent into the form. For dependent students, they have to include a parent or at least two parents sometimes into the form. We knew this invite model that we had launched last year was cumbersome, but we didn't really quite know how bad it was. It requires students to basically know a lot of personal identifiers, name, date of birth, social security number of the parent. And then finally, despite robust product testing, we identified additional bugs in beta testing that we could fix before launch. In usability testing, similar to our FAFSA in-person events, we learned just how quick some students can navigate through the form and how little they can read. People breeze through things, they don't look at help text, and it's really impactful to actually watch that in real time. We also love to hear that students thought that the form was easier than in years past. Again, we think this might have been a psychological bump based on more confidence in the system, but we'll take it. We also found that inviting students back after a couple of days to have repeat sessions with us in a virtual session was really important because we could then evaluate what the process state of their form was. We could ask them questions about how they perceive next steps. And it was really helpful for us to investigate some of those post-submission tasks. This is just a quick quote from somebody that says, it was extremely quick. I'm in shock about how quick that was. And that was somebody filling out the FAFSA form. And finally, I would give it an A before a D-. And now I'll pass it back to Tate to talk a little bit more about how we refine the user experience despite sometimes our laundry list of constraints.
Thanks, Sean. So in this last section, I want to talk about some very specific and practical examples of interventions on the front end that we were doing to address user pain points, even in the midst of the delays and pain of last year. Because I want to emphasize that our experience has been not just that bold collaborative approaches to problem solving are needed to restore user trust in forms gone wrong, but also that you should never give up on the front end, even when you have pressing technical constraints. Harm mitigation, incremental, simple improvements can still go a long way to addressing pain points without a lot of developer time taken away from bug fixing. Let's start on an example. For the updated FAFSA form, it's now required that all users have a studentaid.gov account to fill out the form online. And that meant that we needed a new process where users without a social security number could, for the first time, create a studentaid.gov account, sometimes called their FSA ID. But when we implemented this option for account creation to not include the SSN under a deadline that didn't allow for a design phase or research that was outside of the core FAFSA flow, well, anyway, we ended up with this checkbox option that you can see here. And wouldn't you know it, folks clicked on it, thinking it was just another terms and conditions checkbox, because that's exactly what it looks like. In fact, 6% of folks did that. And while we knew our population of no SSN users was not that high, not nearly, and quick tests confirmed users were clicking without reading. But here's the thing, we'd already launched, and that launch wasn't going well, but this was adding fuel to the fire. So we pivoted as a small team quickly. And we added bold text. Didn't require any dev time away from critical issues at all. But it still brought the population clicking through from 6% to 4%, a 2% increase. It's still way higher than our estimates of the population size, but it stemmed, some of the issues that folks who do this have. Because, for instance, folks who actually do have an SSN but click on this get flagged later in that process, and they have to correct it. They go down an error path. So this is not without consequences. So then we did the next lightest lift. And we implemented the actual pattern, we really should have done from the beginning, making only users who don't know what to do with the SSN field have to encounter the no SSN checkbox. We used a progressive display. So initially, now users do not see that checkbox. Instead, if they're asking themselves, what if I don't have an SSN? They can click on that, it expands, and now they can make that selection. And what that really allows is that everyone else who does have an SSN can remain on autopilot without that inattention, resulting in a big problem for those users. And we saw this bring us down another 2%, so that we had a total 70% decrease in no SSN account creation. Very simple, practical things. I think we have time for at least one more example. So let's do that. So due in part to content and policy not finalizing copy until far later than the initial designs, here is an example of a question that was never tested with users. In brief, it asks that if the student's parent is unwilling to provide information on the form, would the student want to proceed nonetheless with only being eligible for unsubsidized loans? In other words, not being eligible for Pell Grants or other preferable types of aid. They're opting out of that eligibility. Now, this screen, just from a heuristic perspective, violates a lot of rules, of course. I think many people could see that, right? Not having yes, no questions is certainly a violation. Yes, no questions require you to carefully read and understand the prior information so that you can properly answer them. They're not self-contained. It has a very unclear double negative phrasing in the question itself. That's certainly going to trip plenty of people up. It has an unclear page title that doesn't get at the heart of why it's being asked in the first place. But again, we couldn't, in the midst of that cycle, immediately change the question form or label itself. Not only because it would have back-end processing implications for our partner systems, but also PRA implications and clearances on the form itself. But still, we did a number of small things. We changed the helper text. We changed the page title. We defaulted the selection to no. We added a warning modal for those who select yes. Very simple, small interventions. And that resulted in a 92% decrease in the number of users that were making that selection, all without implications to the back end. And we are still hopeful that next year we will revisit the core of that question and bring that number of those who are mistakenly ineligible for most aid down even further. So let's talk and hand it back over to Sean to sum it up a little bit here on what we learned and what you can do.
Awesome. Thanks, Tate. As Tate said, we're just going to leave you all with a few key takeaways. But first, we launched. So this is exciting for us. We actually launched 10 days earlier than our public mandate of December 1st. So on November 21st of this year, the 2025-26 form launched. So if you're a grad student or undergrad, you're looking to go to school, child in school, go fill out your FAFSA. On the first week of submissions, again, we, as I said, had launched 10 days earlier. We had call center wait times that were under 1 minute. And then we are looking at satisfaction scores of 96% are giving us 4 or 5 stars out of 5. And then we have 80% rating the FAFSA a 5-star experience. So finally, just 3 key takeaways that I think Tate and I really want to leave you all with is test early and often. For us, testing in person when you can and with real data. So just don't rely on design prototypes or screenshots, like actually watch people fill out the form. We rediscovered, I think, the tremendous benefits of in-person testing after, I think, a very big lull during COVID. Number 2 is, ensure that obviously your software is working first. That's the key priority, but you don't want to forget the learnings from user research. Effectively stay the course and keep doing user research work even when it gets tough. And then number 3, small details compound, so don't ignore them, even when things aren't going well. As Tate mentioned in his examples, do what you can to fix even the small things that can improve user experience or even outcomes. They really matter. So with that, we are thankful for you all listening, and I think we will transition to the Q&A period.
Thank you both so much. Really interesting to see the evolution and something that has had a lot of news about it. So it's fun to see behind the curtain a little bit to see all the great work to make those improvements. We have a lot of questions in the chat, so thank you all so much for engaging as members of our audience. I'm going to jump back to the first 5 team, but encourage folks to keep putting questions in the chat. And also, I think we have slightly fewer questions for our FAFSA team. So let's make sure we get some more questions in for them. But the question with the most votes for our first 5 team is some more information about what platform or application tool are you using for the form building and eligibility and web portal for users to log in.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So I'll split this up into the eligibility screener and then the common application, because we kind of built those on 2 different platforms. So for the eligibility screener, we have a content management system. We used Umbraco, but it would work with WordPress or Drupal or any content management system. And in there, programs can be added and removed and all the eligibility criteria selected. And then we use a Vue client-side JavaScript application to actually do the eligibility screening on the client's computer, and that way we don't collect like birthday of the child on the eligibility screener, so we can get away with less security concerns there. And really we're only capturing the parent or guardian's contact information and what programs they're eligible for, so we don't really capture the birth date or any of the other criteria that they selected. And then for the common application, we use off-the-shelf HIPAA compliant form builder Cognito Forms. There's a few other that are similar. And then we built a view application around that to kind of pre-fill those pre-built forms. And then the data is transmitted to the agency through webhooks and other APIs that get triggered when someone submits the application.
Great. And our next, I'm going to do like a 2-in-1 question because I think they're somewhat related, but first was a kudos. So this is awesome, First 5 SC. You might have touched on this, but how long did this take to implement? And what sort of administrative blockers did you have building out these systems? For example, procurement, hiring, conflicting interpretations of policy, and how did you overcome them?
Great. So we were really fortunate to have that 1 year period where we did planning and working with partners to identify what First 5 would be. And then we went into the very long state procurement process, which took, I believe, over a year. And then they brought me on as project manager. And we started building out the eligibility screener and site in April of 2021. And we launched it in beta in December 2nd, 2021. So that moved very quickly. And, in that period, we had, as you do in building projects like this, millions of meetings with different stakeholder groups to do discovery about their eligibility criteria, map it, and then get their approvals. And so this actually took quite a bit of time and getting them to agree to using the common language and plain language and making sure that worked for them, right? And so after we had those agreements, we were able to test and launch. And then the longest part of development was building the common application. And at that point is when we realized that having one application for all of our partners, we have about 30 programs on the application out of the 40 plus on the screener, it was not possible to have one single application. And so from there, we found ways to still simplify to make sure that the information was like populating across forms and really clear for families. As far as hurdles there, of course, there were lots of concerns among partners about how they received the information, what happened to the information. And then I'll be quite honest, we spent a lot of time thinking about their own technical capacity to, do a, two-factor authentication to log in securely and things like that. So we took a lot. I've had to show someone how to download an app onto their cell phone to be able to do that. So just really keeping in mind the end user of the parents aren't the only capacity building that we need to do within the early childhood system to make sure that people can actually receive and process the applications.
Great. Turning back to more of how the information is stored and kind of the back end integration on this product, can you tell us more about how the information is stored on the back end and then how it's shared with the other programs? And like, are there paper applications still? Are there integrated eligibility enrollment systems? Are there APIs? How is it all stitched together?
Yeah, so the data varies, as you can imagine, a lot depending on the different applications. So it really it's stored in the form builder software as kind of JSON, just kind of very somewhat unstructured data. And then basically for each, some bigger agencies, had APIs available or created APIs into their systems. And then we had to basically parse that JSON file and send the required information to them. And then other agencies that were using paper, they actually they have to, like Rachel was talking about, they have like a secure, two-factor login on their phone, and then they go in and they can just print it out or download like a CSV file. And a lot of times they're just, printing it out and attaching it to a paper application and moving it through the system the old way. So it's quite a big difference between people who, have more modern systems all the way to like people processing it with paper. But we wanted to meet everybody where they were and provide the same experience for parents. Because the parents don't need to know that the agency has, paper applications. For them, the experience is the same.
Wonderful. Let's do one more question for South Carolina. On the first 5 form criteria screen, I love the language choices, but question on the layout. Did user testing indicate showing everything all at once was easier for users instead of splitting it up into multiple screens?
Yes, as we said, we listened to thousands of parents and we gathered a lot of feedback, and what they wanted was simple, easy to understand, something that they can easily put in their information and get results. So that is why we put everything on that one additional criteria screen, and just broke it down into different sections so they know exactly what type of questions or criteria we're about to ask them for. So yes.
I'll also add to that, we put a lot of the more popular ones at the top. So if people kind of lost interest as they were going down, or stopped reading, like it sounds like happened with FAFSA also, the common ones are right at the top. And then, but yeah, people definitely appreciated them all being on one screen as opposed to going through 10 different steps to answer checkbox questions.
I think also when designing for different literacy levels, sometimes actually stuff on one screen because people really do read from top to bottom is also can be really important as well. There are a lot of other questions for first 5 in the Q&A box. I encourage you all to connect. Some of them are very specific, like how many children can you add to the application? Those are great questions, and encourage you all to connect and ask more questions individually. But let's turn back to our FAFSA team, Sean and Tate. Let's talk more about what the team actually looks like. So how many staff members from the FAFSA team were dedicated to the beta testing and to go out and collect real feedback during FAFSA events, trying to understand the resource allocation considering the scale and the scope of the work here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this, because the beta events were quite ambitious this year, and again, we had not done anything like that in the years past. Several folks that came into the Department of Education this year to help specifically with the FAFSA effort really pushed a lot of that and broke a lot of barriers that I think in the past, like travel budget. Do we have the connections with nonprofits to work with? How do we do that logistically? So there were several work streams that were set up very early on in the summer to identify. One of them was a beta sort of work stream that did outreach communication. We had basically 4 different beta periods from October 1st to November 21st. Organizations could publicly apply. So I think we had over 100 organizations, and those included like community access or college access, community-based organizations, CBOs. We had high school districts, like Chicago High School District, Newark was a part of that. And there were several then schools that also participated. So we ramped that up. Like beta 1, for instance, just had like 6 community-based organizations that hosted events. It was very small. We had several hundred users in that group. We had staff that went to every event. And as I said before, FSA or Federal Student Aid is, we have lots of different vendor teams. So I think in total, we had like 49 people that went to at least one event. And each event basically had a team of like 6 to 8 people on the ground, working with the actual nonprofit at like a FAFSA night. And then in terms of the grand scale, like there's at least over 100 people between federal government staff, contractor staff, and then some of our folks that are with Federal Student Aid for a few months are put the number well over 100 that are kind of dedicated to FAFSA 100%. So we had lots of interest in the nights, and I think one of the good things is that we didn't just send like the user research people to those events. We sent business analysts that were doing requirements work so they could help understand how that work affected them. We sent devs and engineers to those events, back-end folks that could see firsthand actually how the work that they are doing contributes to that. So it wasn't just exclusively our UX team, but we did sort of manage all the UX research coming out of those events.
Another question related to the beta testing. Did you do updates between the rounds of beta testing, or did you keep a stable product during that time?
Yeah, I think we can. That's a great question, and we're always trying to balance it. It was really a little bit of both. So we were definitely focused on bug fixing during that beta period. Like we said, we were trying to mitigate risk. But nonetheless, there were things that were discovered that really warranted hot fixes or some patches in the midst. And we had a plan release in at least one major one in the midst of beta that we did do. So that was great to see bugs being discovered and squashed before they went out to the general public. So yeah, it was a mix of both. We really had to do a lot of risk assessment to do deployments without jeopardizing the stability of the system.
Great. The next question is a little bit before beta, but how did you engage the public for initial requirements, or did that only come in beta?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I said before, back all the way to 2021, early 2021, we were mandated basically to start doing a number of outreach and usability testing with different audiences. So one interesting fact, and I don't know if this is the only piece of legislation ever that actually has a mandate to do usability testing in it, but the FAFSA Simplification Act, like by statute, says that the department must test the form with several identified groups. That includes like veterans, low-income folks, adult learners, schools, nonprofits. So there is this mandate in place, and that's not only certainly the only reason that we do the work, but it's certainly a reason that does make us do a lot of the work. So for this year, we had done, there were several other events happening. There were some listening sessions that the department gathered. There also was some open comment, public comment period that they were looking for. On our UX research team, we have been doing like design testing and interviewing back since January of last year, even when things weren't going so well with last year's rollout. We were at every stage of every release, we were doing post-launch testing. So we were going out and doing virtual testing with students and parents after each of the subsequent releases last year, or this past year, early in this past year, to ensure that we were gathering that feedback. So when we walked into the 25-26 project, we have a lot of this knowledge already that helps us inform what we want to fix, what we know are the major pain points. And then right now we are kind of developing, because we've gone through this beta period, how are we resetting? Like, how are we taking this process of gathering feedback from the public in this different way, and how can we scale that and continue that? And it's not just a one-off thing. Like, we want to make sure that this becomes a regular practice. And we really encourage, like, if your teams can do it, or even just like one event or something, like just go be with people and see how your form or product, whatever it is really working, because it can be life-changing.
All right, I think we have time for one last question, which is, are you able to say more on how the project was managed once you managed to integrate teams more fully? What did that look like, and what were some of the challenges? Did you have to make staffing changes?
Yeah, that is. Did we have to do culture change inside of FSA in order to change the playbook? Absolutely. Of course we did. And one of the things that we want to do now is, in some sense, institutionalize those changes. They're not just one-offs in reaction to, an issue, but we are attempting to integrate them into the structure of our offices and how we approach everything from procurement to staffing on every level. So there are new positions, new oversight, all with the philosophy of de-siloing. And I think that's really key for us, because it's so easy to do. It's not just from shipping your org structure, right? It's shipping your org chart, but it's at the vendor level as well. We're in a multi-vendor environment. We work with other departments, even not just the IRS, but also the Social Security Administration and others. There are a lot of layers, a lot of groups. It's very easy to pass the football around. Everything that we are doing in an attempt to change that culture, to think more holistically and to come together more, needs to be reflected in that new org chart. And that means it means new positions, but it also means prioritizations that change and will continue to need to be pushed. Really, I think also everybody internalizing that sense of responsibility to the customer and the end results. We Sean and I don't want to be the user whisperers. We are bringing those users into all of those other environments. I think you've heard Sean and both of us say at different stages, we're bringing more people into those conversations, bringing the voice of the user into more instances and bringing all of us together in order to hear those stories together and help make those prioritizations possible. So yeah, absolutely. You can't do these kinds of things without structural changes.
Thank you for that. That's be our last question. Thank you so much to our audience for all of your great questions. Let's give a virtual round of applause to our wonderful speakers. Thank you for sharing your great work with us and all the work that you do to serve members of the public every day. We're now going to go to break, but during our upcoming break, speed networking will be open. This is entirely optional, time to connect with another FormFest attendee. You can also explore other attendees' profiles and connect asynchronously on our attendee tab. I also encourage you to go back and look at our speaker profiles and connect with our speakers. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end the stream, but thank you once again to our speakers and to all of you for joining us. We will see you back at 11:15 Pacific, 2:15 Eastern. So take care, everybody.